Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. We're hosts Austin Render, Dalton Shetler with you on Monday, January 5th, episode 84 of the Dribble Drive podcast. Thanks so much for joining us, whether you're watching us live on the Back Home Network YouTube channel, maybe you're watching us after the fact, or you're listening to us in podcast form on Apple and Spotify podcasts. We appreciate you being along for the ride. Dalton, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning to you. It's funny. We're just now turning the page into the new year, but
Mm-hmm.
boy, doesn't it already feel like you're just in the grind
Oh
already,
my
the
gosh.
rhythms of the basketball season. But hey, especially given what this year is, and we're going to be talking about a lot of things Big Ten women's basketball, where it feels like almost anybody can beat anybody else any
Yeah.
given night.
Yeah.
This is going to be a wild couple of months. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It feels like forever ago that you and I rang in the new year together. What was that,
It's
Wednesday night? I mean, gosh, that feels like so long ago. Holy cow. It's gonna be a grind here over the next 2.5 months to get to the NCAA tournament for these squads. And it's gonna be a lot of fun to watch. And maybe nerve-wracking when our teams are involved, but it's gonna be fun when you're a neutral and watching some of these games. Reminder, give us a follow on X at Dribble Drive WBB. Keep up to date on all the latest stuff going on. Hit subscribe on that Back Home Network YouTube channel as well. Stay up to date on all of our live shows. We've got dueling streams between me and my wife here in the Render household, so hopefully the Wi-Fi holds up. We're going to find out as this goes through here today. But Dalton, there's so many ways we could start this show. There were so many big games. There were two top 10 upsets. There was a steamroll in LA. I think Iowa's going a little under the radar with what they've been doing.
Mhm.
Michigan State had a nice week and a big win over Illinois. I think we got to start with the top 10 wins, though. And we'll start, I guess, in fairness, I guess, we'll go chronologically. The first one that happened was Illinois beating Maryland. Then let's just talk about Illinois' week. So we'll start with this Maryland game. Dalton, this was a really fun basketball game, and it was. I was talking to some of the folks on our staff because we had Maryland after the fact, and I said, "What did Illinois do that kind of befuddled Maryland?" And it was, well, Maryland or Illinois doesn't turn the ball over, which is where Maryland feasts. Maryland is so good at taking live ball turnovers and making you pay for them. Illinois does not turn the ball over. They did not turn the ball over in this game. And then Maryland went 1 for 12 from three. Now, if you're going to get a 1 for 12 3-point performance with 0 in the second half from Maryland, that's going to be a tough one to win if you're the Terps. And so Illinois did what they needed to do, taking care of the basketball, did what they needed to do defensively, running Maryland off the 3-point line, and they made the timely shots. Dalton, Barry Wallace just continues to be a really solid player for this team. Sierra Parchment is making big plays, and Maddie Weber, we'll talk about it in your game. She continues to be a big part of Illinois' success off the bench. This Illinois team, I know they lost on Sunday to Michigan State, but I come away from this week and overall up on Illinois. I'm very impressed with what Shauna Green is doing with this team. I certainly was high on them in the preseason, and then the
Mhm.
injuries hit, and it was like, okay, I'm going to take this, and then they lost to Oregon State. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take a step back. Well, then they go on this long winning streak, which includes a top 10 win over Maryland, and here they are. Sitting at 3-1 in the Big Ten now. This got them to 3-0. This was a big time win and kind of a statement win for Shauna Green in what year 4 already for her, and just
Yep.
a big statement win for Illinois.
Well, and it tied, I think the no, it gave them their best start in school history through 14 games. It tied the best win streak they had ever seen with 11 straight wins. There's so much big of this. This was the highest ranked Big Ten win the program's ever had over a number 7 Maryland. There were so many crowning achievements from this. But if you get back to some of the macro when you talk about the Illini team, because now both you and I have been able to see them in person
Yep.
with both Indiana and Michigan State playing them. Of course, Michigan State got the win on Sunday, but I'm with you. I walked away from that one saying, wow, really impressed with the Illini. And the biggest reason I was impressed is the freshman guard, Destiny Jackson. I think when you lost so much of the core that was there before and you lose Genesis Bryant, you lose so many of the leaders, the pieces. Bryant obviously ran so much of what they were doing offensively. I kind of was peculiar how it would continue to go, because you're right. It's a team that doesn't turn the ball over much. The coaching staff has the goal each game they want to have 13 turnovers or less. In that loss Sunday, they only had 8 turnovers. And really, it's because Destiny Jackson runs everything so
Yep.
smoothly. And not only is she running the offense and is she so poised as a freshman, kind of uncharacteristically, but she had 10 rebounds. The 5'6" freshman guard had 10 rebounds in the loss at Michigan State. I came away wildly impressed with Destiny Jackson. I think that's a big piece of why they're able to be as good as they are right now. You brought up Maddie Weber. She had a season high 22 in the loss at Michigan State. Look, the Spartans went in. The coaching staff had a game plan of, look, Illinois hasn't necessarily proven that their bread and butter is the outside, that it's the perimeter.
Mhm.
They like to get Barry Wallace inside. They like to get Parchment inside. They like to go mid range with Weber. They like to do a lot of things around the lane. What if we force him out? And to Illinois' credit, Maddie Weber and Barry Wallace hit big shots and nearly gave them a chance to win that game on Sunday. So I'm with you. I know I'm extending it past just the huge moment it was in Champaign with the win over Maryland, but I walk away wildly impressed. I know the depth is tested. I think as Guyton continues to get her sea legs under her, it'll help a little bit more coming back from the injury.
Yep.
But I do believe there's enough pieces there, and that's a solid rotation, barring any more injuries for the Illini, that they're going to compete at a pretty high level in this league.
I'm glad you got blown away by Destiny Jackson too, because when I watched her, I think she had 10 rebounds in our game too, and she's the smallest player on the floor, but
Yeah.
she just has a knack for the basketball. Whether that's taking care of it and finding the right person, she's not going to blow you away. I think she had 5 points in your game. She I think had 2 or 4 points against Indiana, but it's impressive if you can blow basketball people away like us by scoring 4 points a game.
Hmm.
And Destiny Jackson does that because you can just tell the trust that Shauna Green has in her. I got flashbacks of Genesis Bryant watching
Yeah.
her run the show, and they're different players, certainly, but you have that same feeling of like, gosh, this offense is just in good hands. And you thought, okay, well, Shauna Green's teams have always been low turnover teams because they've been so experienced. Now
Mhm.
you're throwing in a couple of freshmen into this thing. It's going to get worse. And it's not. They just don't turn the ball over. They make great decisions. They take good high percentage shots. And like you said, they even hit the 3-pointers against Michigan State, shooting over 40%, hitting 10 threes in that game. On the Maryland side, I think you and I have been kind of sitting here going, okay, when's the other shoe going to drop on Maryland? When are these injuries going to catch up to them? And I'll be honest with you, Dalton, I just saw Maryland last night. I'm still extremely impressed with them. I still think they have good depth. I still think they're going to be just fine. But this loss kind of felt like it was coming. Like they needed one stumble just to kind of show that there are things that still need to improve. This was turnovers down the stretch, Dalton. This was a tight game, and they're down by one. And Yarden Gerzon, who had a decent game, just didn't shoot the ball very well. She turned the ball over with 22 seconds to go down one. Illinois goes down and scores. Then Sailor Poffenbarger gets it back, but has her shot blocked. Then Illinois goes down and scores. Then Gerzon turns it over again down 3 with 10 seconds left. And then Poffenbarger misses a 3 at the buzzer to tie the game. So it was just a bit of a chaotic final sequence for Maryland. That's the thing I think they're going to have to figure out as they go down this season is when you need a basket in a clutch situation. That was always Kayleen Smeichel. That was Smeichel's time to shine. So who is going to take that basketball and go get a basket? It's not really Gerzon's game. Gerzon's game is for you to try and get a basket and have her sitting in the corner and have her knocked down. She's deadly in clutch situations, but somebody's got to get her the basketball. She's not necessarily a create your own shot. And then, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I start to wonder, based off of what you saw last night there in College Park as well, is it becoming more and more Alucci? I mean,
Oh my
34
gosh,
points
yes.
last night.
Oh yeah, she was. It snuck up on me. She had 16 at half, and it was a really good first half. Next thing I knew, I looked at the stat sheet. She had 29. It's her defense that leads to it. She gets a lot of live ball steals that then turn into layups on the other end. She did it 3 or 4 times, breaking up handoffs, breaking up loose passes on the perimeter, and she feasts on that. And our staff knew that. They told the players, like, look, you cannot turn the ball over in live ball situations because they will make you pay. And they did. Alucci's really good. And her defense, she was all over Shea the entire game. They have great length, which is going to give teams a lot of problems with Garzone and Poffenbarger and Okanawa.
And it's typical
And
Maryland.
yeah, it really is. I do think she's the player right now. I don't know necessarily if I think she's better. Like she's terrific in transition. I don't know if in the half court, when you're down by one with 10 seconds to go, if she's going to be able to make a play. And I don't know if that's fair. She was sensational last night. But I am curious to watch as Maryland gets into some tighter games where they go with the basketball. They're going to get Ohio State coming up this weekend, which will be a fun one to keep an eye on. But interesting to see what their late game situation looks like. But again, all credit to Illinois. This does more to me for Illinois than it did for bumping Maryland down. I think this is going to happen throughout the Big Ten this season. We're going to see pretty much, I think everybody outside of UCLA is going to have moments like this. I think we saw it with Michigan. I think we're going to see it at some point with Iowa. We've seen it with Washington and Michigan State, like getting beat by good to average teams in the Big Ten because everybody can do that in this conference. And so not a huge surprise that we saw some upsets. They just all kind of happened at once. And now we sit here with Maryland finally having their first loss.
And I think it's worth pointing out, we mentioned we both have now seen Illinois in person. The one difference, though, is you saw them in Champaign. I
Yeah.
saw them on the road, and you saw some of the videos and the pictures of this upset win over Maryland, and it looked like just a raucous
Yeah.
environment.
Yep.
I mean, what they're starting to build in Champaign in terms of a home court advantage seems to be a real tangible thing. I was curious if you experienced it, but were you during the holiday break?
It wasn't holiday break, but it was an 11 a.m. game, local
Okay.
time. It was still a good crowd. It wasn't like what we saw in those videos from New Year's Day.
Yeah.
But they are setting attendance records. It's something that Shauna Green is really focused on in her time there. And now they're sitting here with a really good basketball team. And Illinois fans are similar to Indiana fans, just Midwestern fans. Like when you are good, there's going to be a ton of support for you. I think we're going to see that a little bit up in Madison with Wisconsin here and what they're doing. I think you're going to start. That's something that John Arias told us before the season is like, hey, if they start winning, there's going to be a lot of people at these games because Wisconsin people love basketball. And I
And
think
look
you're
at
seeing
how
that
they
with the.
support oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off,
No.
but how they support, volleyball too. I
Yeah,
mean, that Wisconsin will support women's sports to a high level, and
absolutely.
basketball keeps doing what they're doing.
Yeah, so the other Illinois score was obviously what we touched on. They lost 81-75 at Michigan State. This was a good week for your Spartans. Let's give a moment to shout out Michigan State. They won the Dribble Drive big game in Bloomington 80-60. And then this was just a really nice performance because Dalton, I think one of the big things here is that Grace Van Sluten goes down in the third quarter with an injury, and they still kind of were able to withstand it. It might not have been pretty. It was a little bit duct taped at times, but
Yep.
but when you lose a player who was playing not only your best player, but she was playing great, had 15 points in this game, you got to figure out what to do without her. And I thought they did a really good job of kind of manufacturing the offense and figuring it out without her. And you know what? They find a way to beat a really good Illinois team where half the game you were missing your best player. So kudos to Michigan State, who's certainly going to jump up in the polls. And it feels like that Wisconsin loss is a long way behind them.
Yeah, and you really framed that game perfectly. I mean, that is exactly what happened, and you had Grace Van Sluten at her best to start that game. She had 15 points, 9 rebounds by halftime. It was the same Grace that we saw in that Ole Miss game, where not only are you getting the high level production from your best player in Grace, but Grace stepped out there yesterday and immediately set the tone. And Robin Fralick had said to me and others before this game that this was going to be the most physical game by far that MSU has played this season. And given that Ole Miss was just a couple weeks in the rearview mirror, I said, really? Okay. So Illinois is that kind of physical. And the players heard that message. I mean, they came out and simply were more physical even than a really physical Illinois team to begin the game. They were cleaning the glass. They were winning the rebounding battle. They still do win the rebound battle. But when Grace exited, you could feel an intangible shift
Yeah.
in the vibe of the game. And you're right. It became a little bit of, as Illinois cut it down to 3, oh my, how are we going to escape this? Do we have enough to get this done? And it felt like there was a combination of Kennedy Blair, who is stepping up big
Yep.
and big and big in so many different ways for this squad. 19 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists in this win. Also came up with some elite defensive plays. But Rashonda Jones also came up with a clutch and one bucket that felt like it kind of won the game. When the Spartans were in some trouble against Rutgers, which was a bit odd at the time to experience that one, they went to Rashonda Jones, and she came away with a couple of big buckets to get the win. In the Baja Mar tournament championship game against Clemson, it was Rashonda Jones in the fourth quarter putting it away. We're seeing Rashonda Jones take over in big moments for Michigan State, and not necessarily forcing, but it's just finding her in these moments. And that's something to keep an eye on throughout the course of the season, because right now, Rashonda Jones, or Spider is her nickname, that you'll hear. She's coming up big for the green and white.
She looks comfortable. She looks
Yeah.
comfortable in this system. She looks comfortable with the ball in her hands. It looks a lot like that freshman year Rashonda Jones, who we saw at Purdue, who we saw really look really good. And we're like, wow, Purdue's got somebody here. Now Michigan State's got somebody here. And she looks really good. Michigan State seems to have several options in a late shot clock, late game situation, whether it's Jones, whether it's Blair, whether it's a healthy Van Sluten. Obviously, the Theron Halleck injury is something to monitor because she would have been one of those people as well. Jaylen Brown had a great game against Indiana the other day. So there are people in this lineup for Michigan State that can make plays, and I think that's dangerous as they go through it. Just wanted to shout out the end of the incredible Emma Shoemate stat. She did turn the ball over one time in that game against Illinois, her first turnover of the season, and I think over 260 minutes or something like that.
I
Dalton's
have
gonna
it
get
here.
he's gonna get the sheet out. He's very sad. If you're listening to us, Dalton is very sad.
You can see on the video the prep sheet. I had this stat ready to go. I was so excited. As she played 21 minutes, or the turnover came at 21 minutes yesterday. And entering, she had 248 minutes played. So 269 minutes this season before her first turnover.
Dang.
I
It's a
mean,
sad.
Skim Mulkey still said that's a women's basketball record. I have no way to validate or disprove, so I'm just gonna ride with Skim Milky
I
or
rolled
whatever
with it
the
on the
Yanks account of.
broadcast on Thursday. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
that was what an incredible stretch. I mean, that was unbelievable.
Don't be sad that it's over, be happy that it happened, or whatever that saying is.
I think he's. I think he.
I yeah, just that's an incredible, incredible run. A lot more stuff we want to get to. How about Washington? I think a team that had been written off a little bit based on the way that their December kind of went. They lost to USC in a toss-up game in LA, and then they lose to Stanford in San Francisco in a game that you're like, gosh, that feels like one that you really would like to have as a little non-conference feather for Washington. And so I think people kind of forgot about the Huskies a little bit. And they come out here and they play very well in this game. And this, Dalton, is the Avery Howell that we were excited to see in year 2, wherever that was going to be. It ended up being at Washington. 22 points, 16 rebounds in this one for Avery Howell. She had a couple of threes. She was efficient from the floor. Washington didn't get a ton out of some of their stars, but their defense in this game was so good. And so here's the thing, and we're going to talk about it in the top 5 discussion. But like, for example, Washington, I've had behind USC because USC beat them. But to me, and we'll see it when USC goes out to Ann Arbor, but I just don't see USC winning against a Michigan team. I don't see them having the offense when they need it. But if they're going to win a game, it's going to be like this, 64-52. So
Yep.
Washington and USC to me are similar, and we'll see how USC does. But I think the tiebreakers of head-to-head can only mean so much when you play one time on somebody's court. And so for me, Washington's close to jumping back up into this discussion for the top 5 because this was a really impressive performance.
I think you're spot on, and I also like the definition or qualification you give these tiebreakers. I mean, these head to head does matter, but
Sure.
it can't be the absolute metric. And so, like as we go through ranking and trying to figure out the pecking order, the hierarchy of the standings, it's a good thing to keep in mind. But you're right. This is the Avery Howe game. 22 points, 16 rebounds, went 9 of 14 from the field. And I think what's scariest, Austin, is okay, you have Eladine, you have Sabia Sellers. If neither of them are having a great night, Washington just proved to everybody
Yep.
that they have another player who can get them a win against the number 6 team in the country
Yep.
with a performance like that. And that is a really scary reality to face. I mean, that's becoming a real big three with those Huskies. And if you find nights where all of them are clicking, or you get two of them clicking at a high level, I mean, that's going to be a handful for a lot of opponents. And of course, they now have a full week of rest before Michigan State comes to town to Seattle.
And if you can get Grabovskaya or McGoy or somebody else to add to it as well, Hannah
Yeah.
Steins, that they become very deadly. I tell you what, there's no tweet or no text that has aged more poorly than when I texted you at halftime of the Michigan-Oregon game and said Michigan might just be a juggernaut this season. And then they nearly lose to Oregon, and then they do lose to Washington. This was an 18-point game entering the fourth quarter. Credit to Michigan. They cut it to 5 with a little over a minute to go, but Washington withstands the run. Michigan was 33% from the floor, 21% from three. Silas Swords and Olivia Olson, they combined for 27, but they did it on 11 of 36 shooting. So
Mhm.
to me, the story is the capability of Washington defensively. And we kind of saw it in that rock fight in LA against USC. But this is a Michigan team that's no joke. They can score the basketball in so many different ways. And Washington just took them and twisted it and said, "No, you're not going to score today." And I think it's a little similar to Maryland, where after the Oregon game, you kind of felt like, okay, there's going to be some hiccups for Michigan. I
Sure.
think halftime of the Oregon game, I was guilty of saying this team may not lose. And now it's like, okay, there's going to be some sort of moment where Michigan drops one. Long road trip. It's the second game out there. You know what? You just chalk it up to, hey, it's been a long week. That's a really good. I think it's going to be different this year, Washington or Dalton with Washington. I made this comment several times last year about how teams would go out to the West Coast and they'd get beat up by Oregon in this physical, brutal game. And then they'd go up to Seattle for the second part of the trip and kind of be like, okay, they're not going to punch me in the face like Oregon. Iowa did it. Indiana did it. They went up there and they had much better games in Seattle after a physical, brutal loss to Oregon. And I think that's going to be much different this year. You're not going to want to play Oregon and then have to go play Washington because they are a physical, brutal defensive team this season. Michigan got that firsthand. And credit to Washington. They are making our lives very difficult to rank the top 5 teams in this
It's
league
impossible.
because
Impossible.
Illinois and Washington just threw their hats in the ring as well. And Washington's going to get another crack at another top 25 team with Michigan State coming to town on Thursday. Boy, this is fun. This is fun. And New Year's Day was fun. I got to be honest with you, did not watch any of these games live. My Hoosiers were playing a pretty important game on the gridiron, but I did go back and take a look and evaluate what happened in all these games. And this is just impressive. Like you said, I was going to make this comment and I forgot on Michigan State. Michigan State won that game without forcing a bunch of turnovers and without getting all these fast break points from their press and their aggressive defense. So finding another way to win. Washington does not get a whole lot out of Sellers and Ladine. They find another way to win. When you are going to be a good basketball team, you have to have more than one way to beat teams. And Washington found another way to beat a really good Michigan team today. And speaking of another way to win, this Iowa team is finding all sorts of ways to win basketball games, Dalton. Iowa beats Nebraska 86-76. This game was tied at 70 of the fourth quarter. They won on a 14-1 run. So this Iowa team, to me, they can do it with their offense. They can do it in so many different ways with their offense. Chit-Chat Wright is becoming the player on this team, which is what we kind of said before the season or in the non-con. I've been saying this cannot be Hannah Stolke carrying the team, and it's not. Chit Chat Wright has been sensational. Ava Hayden continues to produce another great game for her in this one. And then Hannah Stuelke does provide a double-double. And boom, you take some of that weight off of Stuelke's shoulders, and she can really contribute and really lead this team. I look, you hand up. I was an Iowa skeptic about a month ago. Same. I am no longer an Iowa skeptic. This team continues to impress me. They can score, they can defend, they can do everything they need to do to be a top 15 team in the country. I'm curious to see when they have to take it on the road, what they look like. They lost at Iowa State in a game that was very tight, but this game was obviously at home. They're going to be at Northwestern and at Indiana this week, which are not the sternest tests that the Big Ten has to offer quite yet. They will not have a tough, top 25 road game until Maryland on January 22nd, which is obviously going to be popcorn-worthy television there. But I am very impressed, Dalton. I am admitting to being wrong initially on Iowa. I thought they were ranked too high. I didn't understand where this team was getting all the hype from. I apologize to Chit Chat Wright. I was unfamiliar with your game. She's been sensational this season and leading the way for Iowa.
Well, put me in the same boat, partner, because I was pretty skeptical at first, too. And honestly, it was one of those things where a lot of times when, at least for me, if I'm going to preview a team or whatever, and the consensus seems to be higher than what I'm willing to give it, I kind of analyze it. And like in Iowa's case, I was like, okay, well, if they're going to be where everybody says they are, then Chit Chat Wright has to be an all Big Ten player, no doubt. And what we're seeing now is she's an all Big Ten player, no doubt. And so Iowa is at their ceiling, or what we projected to be their ceiling, because it turns out Chit Chat Wright is that good. You're right. If this was just the Stuelke show, I think it would have been worrisome. And I think we were concerned if it would be before the year, because Hannah Stuelke was at her best when she was playing alongside Caitlin Clark, just running down the floor in transition. Yep. That was the best Hannah Stuelke there had been. And now you pair her with an elite guard, and also Ava Hayden, the season that she's quietly kind of put together there in Iowa City. And look, in that last game, she went 8 for 10 against Nebraska. She's been efficient in her play for the Hawkeyes. I'm with you. I think Iowa absolutely is the real deal. They've now made me a believer. And look, we'll get to our top 5 in a little bit. Don't be upset that I don't necessarily have them moved. The best way I can frame it, Austin, is I think there is a gap as we continue to do tiers and classes. I think UCLA is far and away number 1 at the moment. I think Iowa is firmly in that next group, because I think Michigan, Maryland have come down a little bit. Iowa's risen up. I think 2 through 4, you can have an argument. You can even interchange however you would like. And then when we get to the rest of the top 5, I mean, good luck. It's just impossible. I think it's 5 through 9 or 5 through 10 you could interchange. So it's just agree. It's wild, but that's what I think Iowa has done with a win like this. The wins they've had, they only have 2 losses. You mentioned one was against the great Audie Crooks. The other was against UConn. They've had close wins against Miami, some scares. They had a close win over Baylor, but that was a 7th-ranked Baylor team at the time. Who
now beat Iowa State.
Yes. Yeah. So if you go full circle with everything. But nonetheless, I think Iowa's put themselves in a discussion of 2 through 4 in the Big Ten with what they've done here throughout the course of the season.
Totally
2 through 4. Did I say that correct?
2 through 4. Yep. Okay. And they could be a hosting team in the NCAA tournament. No doubt about that, which again, Carver Hawkeye Arena is a great place to play and a great place to host the NCAA tournament, because what a home court advantage that is. And honestly, Dalton, they're sitting at 3-0 right now. They've got Northwestern, Indiana, Oregon, the next 3 games. Like there's a real possibility we're looking at a 6-0 Iowa team taking on your Spartans in Iowa City coming up in a couple of weeks. So that's exciting if you're an Iowa fan. They're just built so well, Dalton. They have Chit Chat Wright running the show, and then they've got 2 post presence in Hayden and Stuelke that are dominant. You can't double them, though, because they surround them with shooters. You've got people like Feuerbach and Stremlo and McCabe, who just surround them with such threat. Addie Deals had a pretty solid freshman season as well. So that this just feels like a really well put together team by Jan Jensen, and they are rolling right now. For Nebraska, hat tip to Britt Prince. She continues to play great basketball. 27 points in this one, at 10 of 18 from the floor, 2 of 4. She's just efficient. The issue is at times she didn't get enough help, and honestly, 76 points is not a bad offensive performance. They shot the ball well. They scored it. They just didn't get enough stops, and that'll be something to watch for Nebraska as the season goes on. Is can they get enough stops to win some of these big games? They're likely to drop out of today's AP poll with a couple of losses to USC and Iowa since the last poll came out. This was a murder in LA. This was absolute destroying by UCLA. The tie game at the end of the first quarter, 16-16, I believe it was. And then late in the second quarter, UCLA put the foot on the gas and they never looked back. And I don't want to make this all about USC. I want to honor UCLA first, but this was a concerning performance from the Trojans. But for UCLA, this defense is something that I continue to try and bring up because I don't want us to sleep on how good they are offensively and all the weapons that they have. When you have Lauren Betts inside, you can be aggressive. The guards have that freedom to be aggressive because they have that back line behind them to make up for maybe some mistakes. One thing I noticed, Dalton, is that UCLA turned the ball over a lot in this game, but they were a lot of dead ball turnovers, and so it didn't kill them. And so if you're out there watching basketball, like dead ball turnovers, they're not great. You don't want to see them, but it at least allows you to go back and get set defensively. It's the live ball turnovers that kill you, and you just can't have those. USC had some of those in this game, and I was a little surprised at the turnovers of UCLA, but other than that, it was a flawless performance from the Bruins.
No, I think you're spot on again. This is one of those that solidifies what we thought we knew about UCLA, and it does raise some question marks, maybe amplifying them about USC. I think we both feel very confident, and again, I think this is the best team in the league right now. I think we can say that definitely. But USC, now that's 4 losses on the season. Of course, they've won against some really great competition. They have a couple of good wins in pocket to show for things as well, but overall, it's kind of the same old USC offense in terms of the question marks. Can somebody help Jazzy when she's struggling? And it feels like there's just so much weight on her shoulders. Look, this is a USC team that we're talking about a really good program. They only scored 6 points in the fourth quarter. Now, granted, it was decided at this point, but still, it goes to show the lack of firepower that maybe they're having. Jazzy Davidson in this game, 4 of 15 from the floor for 10 points. London Jones in her revenge game against her old squad, UCLA, 6 points, going 1 of 9 from the floor, 1 of 5 from deep. It just feels like there's too many offensive gaps where you only have. Look, for USC in this game, if we really study this box score, we mentioned those two. Kara Dunn had 11 points. She was the leading scorer. Kennedy Smith had 7. And then you have only 3 other players that scored, and 2 of them only added in a bucket. So it goes to show, like, there are some real offensive question marks. I think you and I, maybe when it's not against UCLA and the talent that the Bruins have, we still feel pretty confident in the Trojans' defense if they're playing their best. I mean, it really is a strong force, but there's some real question marks about this offense.
It feels a little bit like when you think about the UCLA USC game last season where they went over 2 quarters without somebody other than Juju Watkins making a basket. And it feels like we're a little like this team would also be a little Juju Watkins dependent if she were on it. And that's not fair. She's a transcendent player. Maybe they look totally different with her out there. But I think, Dalton, the loss of Kiki Iriafen and Rhea Marshall is something that I know you have brought up and I tend to forget about, and it's things we should not forget about. Those 2 make a big difference. They don't have a post presence right now. They don't have a reliable 5, A, to throw the ball to, and B, to defend. And that I'm watching it with my Hoosiers right now as they've been without Z for 8 games, is when you don't have a post presence, it limits what you can do offensively. It puts
Mhm.
a lot of pressure on your guards. There's no double teams, so nobody's able to get open. And it just makes things a lot more difficult. So I do think that they're going to need to get a post for next season. They're going to need to find somebody to add into this roster. They missed that, I think, in the portal this season. And we'll see what it looks like moving forward. USC is going to beat a lot of teams with this defense. They're just, to me, it's different. Like Washington showed me they can beat a top 10 team. I don't know if USC can. They have been blown out in their 3 opportunities. Now, granted, they are 3 of the best teams in the country, South Carolina, UConn, and UCLA. But I don't know if USC is capable of beating a Michigan, if they're capable of beating a Maryland. They certainly show they're not capable of beating UCLA. So to me, USC is falling back into that pack of in that 5 to 8 range in the Big Ten.
Well, and I think that's pretty well put as also is that maybe their ceiling is shorter than we had thought. Their floor, though, because of the defensive
Yeah.
foundation, is going to win them a lot of games that they should be competing and winning in. And for the record, too, Austin, I know this is obvious to us, but just for the listeners, there is no questioning how elite of a talent and a scorer Jazzy Davidson is,
Mm-hmm.
how great offensively some of these players are. The point just is the way this current system is in place, the flow, it's not working. It just simply is not working. These are extremely talented players, but without a post presence, without their generational talent in Juju Watkins, what they currently have out there and the way it is playing off of each other just simply is not clicking or capitalizing, excelling at all. And they have got to find ways to get the most out of them from here. And I think that's going to be a tall task for Lindsey Gottlieb and the staff. I think it's also potentially doable that they can draw something out of this talent. But the way it currently is set up is just not working.
I am worried they are susceptible to a loss to somebody who should because their offense may have one of those nights
Yeah.
where they just aren't there. That's my concern, is that there's going to be somebody who rolls into LA like an Oregon or a Minnesota who they are playing this week in Minneapolis. Like there's somebody, and I'm not saying they should beat Minnesota. Minnesota's a good basketball team, but maybe there's just like maybe it's in Indiana, for example. Like Indiana gets hot from 3 and USC loses because they just can't score. I don't know. I'm just thinking I'm worried that there might be a game where they lose 55-50 to somebody where it's like, really? You lost to them? Like, we'll see how that goes for USC moving forward. One more team to shut out this week, Dalton. The Wisconsin Badgers go 2-0 this week, and they're sitting at 3-1 in the Big Ten. This game was insane. They were down 28-7 in the first quarter. They got it down a little bit by halftime, kept chipping away, and ultimately win this game by 7. And then they followed it up with another incredible come-from-behind win. They beat Penn State 74-73, going on a 14-0 run over a 6+ minute span in this fourth quarter. They come from 9 behind to win this game. And Wisconsin, and I'm not throwing them into the Big Ten championship conversation. I'm not throwing them into the top 5. But I am saying there's no doubt this is a Big Ten tournament team. There is no doubt this is a team that has separated itself from the bottom of the league. Example A, they beat 2 of the teams you would say they're competing with, and Rutgers and Penn State. Now they play Michigan this week. I'm not going to, in my right mind, say this is a team ready to beat Michigan. They beat them last year. I get that. But I don't foresee them beating Michigan. But I do foresee them being a team that maybe they're able to jump into the conversation with Indiana, jump into the conversation with Oregon, jump into a conversation with Minnesota and Illinois. Like, are they able to play with some of these teams in the Big Ten Conference, Nebraska, for example? Like, maybe they're playing some good basketball, and give Robin Pingeton credit. There has been a trend in this league over the last 4 years that somebody in their first year tends to exceed expectations. And right now, Robin Pingeton was the only new coach in the Big Ten this year, and she is excelling in Madison.
Yeah, it's it's funny because you talk about being able to play with those teams, and of course they picked off Michigan State to start the
Mm-hmm.
Big Ten season. Now that's a game that Michigan State just loathes in memory, like thinking back on. I mean, it's one that's really still upsetting, and the Spartans are still to Michigan State's credit, and I won't make this all about MSU, I promise. Still juggling and finding ways with all the injuries that seem to keep popping up on them. And they've been able to juggle some and pick up wins at Indiana and pick up wins against Illinois and pick up wins against Ole Miss here in the last couple of weeks. But that was one they still couldn't quite figure out at that point in time. Wisconsin nabbed them, and then they pick up a win, as you said, starting with a huge hole against Rutgers, but then against Penn State. Look, Penn State was comfortably in the lead here in this fourth quarter. And then the Badgers had a 14-0 run where everything was working. They shut the water off on Penn State. Penn State didn't score, I think, for 6 minutes, just
Yes.
about
Yep.
6 minutes.
6 minutes and 12
Um,
seconds. Yep.
Wisconsin had made 6 straight field goal attempts. Honestly, Wisconsin took the lead and took so much control of this game that I don't think a 1 point win
No.
actually justifies
Yep.
what had happened here. It took a Keomi McMiller banked three with a second and a half from the top of the key to make it even this close. I mean, Wisconsin didn't only come from behind, but they took full control of the game. And to your point, give a lot of credit to Robin Pinchton that she has immediately changed the culture in Madison of what the standard is for Wisconsin basketball. I think that's really cool to see. I think to your point, I think there's a lot of reason for Wisconsin fans to start getting behind this team.
Yep.
Um, I had what was it? Destiny Howe was 17, right? Yeah, 17 points. Kyra Daniels had 20 points. Both were extremely efficient. They've been a lot of fun to watch. Gift Uchenna again with 10 points, 5 boards. Um, they don't have the most talent. And look, we're talking about a Big Ten conference that I at least know in my neck of the woods, talking with Robin Freilich, she said it's not just the best conference in the league, but it's also the best it's ever been in its history. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's how good, how much praise she gives this Big Ten conference right now. So Wisconsin doesn't have the most talent in that context of the best league and the best of all time, but they've got enough and they have enough fight and will about them. They're going to pick some teams off along
Yep.
the way. And already at 3 Big Ten wins, you're right. Big Ten tournament is in their sights for sure.
And they play Purdue next. So there's no reason they can't sit at 4-1 right now in the Big Ten. And again, how do you rebuild in this conference? That's the question with how good it is. How do you possibly rebuild? Well, here's the easy. This is the dumbed down version. I know it's not this easy, but this is how you could potentially rebuild. You beat the teams that are struggling, and you pick off a team or two above you, and you work from there. And Wisconsin is doing that this season. So far, they're 2-0 against the teams that I think we would have classed them with preseason, Rutgers and
Mhm.
Penn State. They still get Purdue, as we said this week, and then they will still get Northwestern at some point this season as well. And then can you pick a couple of teams off above you? And right now, they have that win over Michigan State. They're also, Dalton, so they're going to play Purdue next, then Michigan, and then Northwestern. So they could be sitting at 5-2 in the Big Ten. The question will be, can they then take that and go beat some teams coming home, or are they going to start to hit that gauntlet of the Big Ten and find themselves losing a few games in a row? How will they respond? They still have home games against Oregon, Nebraska, Indiana, Washington, Minnesota, and Iowa. There's some winnable games in there for sure, to where they could finish up with 6 or 7 wins in the Big Ten. And that's a big step for Robin Pinchton in year one if she can get to that point.
Oh, that's massive. And you're right, with that slate in front of them, you have to imagine that you would favor them in games against Purdue and Northwestern, and
Yep.
you should be sitting at 5 conference wins. The big thing for Wisconsin is you start to wonder, maybe, okay, where does it go from there?
Yeah.
Well, they had 3 non-conference losses. They had a close loss against Marquette. They lost that one by 3. They pushed Ole Miss, if you remember that one,
Mm-hmm.
late, but Ole Miss pulled that one away 65-56. And then they got blown out by James Madison 69-50. And what was really the head scratcher, especially now that we look back at what Wisconsin's accomplished so
Yeah.
far, that feels like just kind of an odd day down in
I think that was
Daytona Beach,
back days that they played, or maybe 2 and 3 days, and
back to back.
crazy
Yeah.
things happen when you're down in those MTEs.
But if you pull off maybe a couple of those, if you get to 7 Big Ten wins, like you could be talking Badgers and bubble in the NCAA tournament even. Like that could be where they reach. The non-conference digs them a little bit of a hole.
Yeah,
I don't think
they need some more ranked wins. The Michigan
yes.
State one is huge. They're going to need to beat like an Iowa at home, or they're going to need to beat like a Nebraska, or maybe they go to USC and find a way to win that. Like they're going to need those 7 or 8 Big Ten wins to be more than just the bottom. But I think more importantly, Dalton, this could be an opportunity to make a run in a WNIT or a
Sure.
WBIT
Yeah.
for Wisconsin. We've seen that work wonders for teams in terms of, think about Illinois a couple of years ago. They made a big run. Minnesota last year won the BIT. My first year as a student at Indiana, the Hoosiers won the WNIT and haven't missed the NCAA tournament since. That's in a little jeopardy right now. But there's a lot of pros to getting a deep run in one of those tournaments, especially in the first year for Robin Pinchton. So whether it's an NCAA tournament team or not, I think there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Wisconsin fan. And as we transition into our stars of the week, Wisconsin fans will find that these are there's a recognizable name here. Kyra Daniels is at the bottom of the list there. She averaged 20 points a game, put up 20 against both Rutgers and Penn State. I felt like she was deserving of a nod. Keomi McMiller, hat tip in a loss, 36 points, 14 of 22 shooting in that loss to Wisconsin. And then Oluchi Okonawa puts up 34. That's a career high for her in the win over Indiana. She was 12 of 22 from the floor. Very good defensively as well against Shea Chesky. Shea only got 9 shots up, only had 2 shot attempts in the entire first half. Okonawa was all over her. So what shows up on the box score is not necessarily everything that Oluchi did in that game from Maryland. Some other performances, there were some tough ones I had to leave off the list. I thought Avery Howell's 22 and 16 against Michigan was deserving to be on there. Lauren Betts had a double-double against USC and scored her 1,500th career point against Penn State this week. Britt Prince had 27 against Iowa. Kennedy Blair and Jalen Brown had some good games this week for Michigan State. I see Ozzie Mamadou for Maryland yesterday had a 12 and 15 double-double in the win over Indiana. Hannah Stolke had the double-double against Nebraska, and Barry Wallace averaged 22 a game, went 6 of 11 from beyond the arc this week for Illinois. So there were a lot of performances that were worthy of ending up on this graphic. These are the 3 that I chose late last night, maybe better at early this morning when we got back from Maryland. But that there's a lot of people that were worthy of it. But I wanted to give Kyra Daniels the shout out because that's consistency, bringing it twice in 2 games that you feel like your team had to have. And Kyra Daniels delivered for Wisconsin. Dalton, top 5 time. Here's where we sit right now and how we look at our top 5. You have UCLA, Michigan, Maryland, Iowa, Michigan State. Sparty jumps into your top 5. I moved Iowa up 1 spot. I've got UCLA at 1, Michigan 2, Iowa at 3, Maryland 4, and Ohio State is my 5th team. I'll give you the floor first. You are wearing and paid by the Department of Michigan State Athletics. I'm just kidding. But what is the because you could literally put 6 different teams at that 5 spot, and there's an absolute argument to be made for it. So make the Michigan State argument for us.
Well, and I think you laid it out perfect because, look, I can go any which way on everything. I think I even texted you this morning. How the hell do you pick a number 5 right now? Because, I mean, the class that's there, and really you're talking about Michigan State, you're talking about Ohio State, you're talking about Washington, USC, Illinois deserves to be in that conversation, and Nebraska for sure. Minnesota's right there also. I mean, that's a large group that really you're just kind of splitting hairs. So I'll tell you what I actually did, Austin, to pick, because all of these teams have a really worthy case. I'm going off of the recent stretch. For Michigan State, they have the second longest win streak in the Big Ten behind what UCLA has. Was Michigan State now has 6 wins in a row. That includes a win against Ole Miss in the last couple of weeks, a 20-point win at Indiana, a win against Illinois, where, again, you're still juggling losing Ice Alexander for the rest of the season. Theron Halleck, we have no idea what the timetable is on Halleck being out. And then in that game against a really good Illinois team that just beat Maryland, you lose your star player, Grace Van Sluten, basically at halftime. And you have to find a way in the second half to win a game. And they found ways to do it. So I wanted to reward them being able to juggle the adversity and just the recent stretch. 6 straight wins. You mentioned it earlier. It feels like that Wisconsin loss is well in the distance. I still think Michigan State still has a lot to figure out, especially when it comes to juggling some of these different rotations. Hopefully Grace Van Sluten's okay. And you see what Michigan State can be. I mean, that's a lot of adversity the Spartans are dealing with kind of all at once. But to their credit, they figured it out so far. For Maryland and Iowa, since we have those two flipped, Maryland, it was just their first loss of the season at Illinois, a crazy environment. I didn't want to punish them too much, even though I'm sure you're getting ready to say you're not so much punishing Maryland as much as you are rewarding Iowa. And that's completely fair. Like we said earlier, I think teams 2 through 4, we can really interchange however we want between Michigan, Maryland, and Iowa as we sit here on January 5th. I think that 5th spot, as we said, Michigan State, Nebraska, USC, Washington, Ohio State, pick your team. You won't hear a complaint from me.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking, is that I'm not necessarily punishing Maryland. I got to see them firsthand last night. They can beat you in a lot of different ways. I just think that Iowa has really impressed me. And I also, what kind of sports show are we if we don't have differing opinions, you know? So I shifted it up a little bit. But again, the margin is so slim between certainly Iowa and Maryland and even Michigan in that conversation as well. Although I do believe that Michigan's ceiling is a bit higher than those other two. Ohio State, to me, the rationale is after seeing what UCLA did to USC, I walked away even more impressed with what Ohio State was able to do against UCLA. And the fact that they were able to make that a game, and that was a tight game in the second half. And so I give Ohio State a lot of credit for that. They have losses this season to UConn. There's not a whole lot. They've lost 2 games, UConn and UCLA. So to me, that's as good losses as you can get in right up there with probably USC's losses right now. But for me, like, USC was my 5. They just were not impressive in the slightest on Saturday night. And the way that Ohio State, in retrospect, played UCLA, I thought earned them a little bit of credit in my eyes. Now, they're going to play Illinois this week in Champaign, which will be an excellent game. Can't wait for that. And then they get Maryland over the weekend. So Ohio State's stay could be short-lived, or it could vault them even further up these top 5 if they have a great week. Right now I have USC at 6, but again, these margins are so tight. Washington 7, Michigan State 8, Illinois 9, and Minnesota 10. But again, even Nebraska at 11. Like, I think the difference between Nebraska at 11 and USC at 6 is small. Now, we saw USC win at Nebraska. So again, that's going to be so here's how I look at head-to-head tiebreakers. So for example, USC with Washington. I'm not opposed to moving Washington ahead of USC as we gather more data. Just because they lost at USC doesn't mean that USC should be ahead of them all season. Right now, for example, USC going to Nebraska and winning on the road, that carries more weight to me I'm going to have a hard time putting Nebraska ahead of USC because USC went to their place and beat them. I think a road win in a head-to-head means a lot. Notre Dame fans who probably aren't watching the show are probably angry that I'm talking about this, but because of their football situation. But I do think head-to-head matters. I don't think it needs to be the end-all, be-all. I think that, like, for example, Washington's win over Michigan, you could probably put them ahead of USC at this point because that is a great win. That's our top 5. I think there's going to be a lot of movement every week now as we see more Big Ten teams playing each other. I mentioned some of the games this week, Dalton. Here's kind of what we're looking at. some of the games. There's more than I can fit on this graphic, but we've got Oregon at USC Tuesday night. You
That'll be
got to.
great.
That's past my bedtime. That'll be a recording for me. 10 p.m. That's too late. Wednesday, we've got Ohio State at Illinois. The bummer is you're going to notice on a lot of these, if you're watching us, no TV designation, a lot of Big Ten plus this week. So you're going to have to gear up for that. Thursday, Michigan State is out at Washington. Another one late night, 9 o'clock, Big Ten plus. And then Sunday's a great slate of games. We're going to see USC at Minnesota, Ohio State at Maryland. That's on Peacock. Michigan State at Oregon, and UCLA at Nebraska. So a really nice slate of games on Sunday. There's about one a day here for the next couple of games. Even tonight, Dalton, we've got Minnesota at Michigan, which is not a game that should be slept on. I think that will be a lot of fun. Iowa's going to Northwestern as well, I believe, tonight. But pretty much for the next 4 days here, we're going to have at least one marquee game a day to keep your eyes on. And then Sunday is going to hit you in the face with a bunch of great games. And I still believe that Indiana is going to figure it out at some point. They play at home against Iowa on Sunday, which is a game that maybe that's where they flip the switch. They play at Nebraska on Thursday. But right now, these are the games that I'm looking at, and I'm saying these are the ones to circle. What stands out to you? I know you're gearing up for a West Coast trip, which has me excited as a neutral to watch a couple of games there with your Spartans.
I was going to say, honestly, what grabs my attention is both of our number fives from this week. For Michigan State, they get ready for a West Coast trip against a Washington team that just picked off Michigan, an Oregon team that nearly also picked off Michigan. I mean, that trip shows that is not easy. I mean, the Wolverines just endured it. But for Michigan State, how do they continue on? And what is the status of Grace Van Sluten? How do they continue to juggle? What's the way they try to win in those West Coast games? I think that'll be interesting to watch. And of course, for Grace Van Sluten, the former Oregon Duck, she gets a bit of a redemption game going back to Eugene. Of course, was playing with Oregon back in the Pac-12 days. Never actually played for Oregon during the Big Ten days. But that'll be interesting nonetheless. And then your number five, Ohio State, going to Illinois. We just gave so much credit about how crazy State Farm Center can be there in Champaign. Can the Buckeyes pick up a win there in front of that crowd? Maryland just fell there. And then speaking of Maryland, Ohio State has to go to Maryland as well. So this is a brutal road travel for both Ohio State and Michigan State a week ahead. And again, for Michigan State, I don't know so much about the Ohio State opponents, but as you mentioned, pretty vested in MSU athletics. Washington's got a week of rest. And Washington has not left home since December 21st. So this is a Washington team that's pretty well rested. They will not play since that win against Michigan until they meet Michigan State on Thursday. So does rest become a little bit of this? I think there's all sorts of variables like that that'll be interesting to find out.
One thing I called out in the preseason, and it was a very small thing, but it's going to come a little bit to fruition today, or this week, I should say. I'm trying to pull up the Google sheet that I made with this on it. Here we go. So Minnesota is going to catch 6 different teams off of their second or off of a bye. Sorry, hold on. Let me make sure I phrased this right. Games. So it actually doesn't come to fruition this week. I was lying, but I do. So Minnesota's going to catch.
Hear it though.
They're going to catch 6 different Big Ten teams off of their East or West Coast trip without a bye. So I think that's going to factor into the schedule throughout the season for Minnesota. This one though, they're going to catch USC on this on a East to West trip, their first game of it. So that's Sunday. Big week for USC, though, Dalton. This is an opportunity for them to bounce back because they're going to play a good Oregon team at home on Tuesday. Then they're going to play a very good Minnesota team on the road. If they go 2-0, they're right back in that conversation for the top 5. I'm going to say right now, I think the top 5 is going to change next week, Dalton. It just feels like they come in twos right now in the Big Ten in terms of your games. Like, you look, it feels like a lot of teams are on here twice. Michigan State's on there twice. USC's on there twice. Ohio State's on there twice. Like, it just feels like in the Big Ten, you don't just go tough game, easy game, tough game. It's like tough game, tough game, tough game. Like it is just you get slapped in the face, and a lot of these teams are going to have to face that this week. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how some of these teams weather those challenges. Before we go, Dalton, I wanted to there's two teams I wanted to throw kind of get a status quo on from you. Mm-hmm. Where do you stand on Minnesota? We haven't seen them play this week. They haven't played since Monday when they beat Indiana. They're 1-1. And we talked about this on last week's show. If they had pulled off that win against Maryland, they'd be sitting at 2-0 right now with one of the best wins in the Big Ten. They obviously did not do that. Where do we sit on Minnesota? I don't know what I mean by that question, but I just feel like that's a team that we haven't seen play in a week. We're a little bit unfamiliar with. They're 1-1 in the Big Ten. They have this giant what if on their resume. Do we still feel like they're into a tournament team? Do we still feel like they are a team that's going to finish in the top half of the Big Ten? Where do we stand on Minnesota?
You know, it's interesting. My thought with Minnesota is overall, it's what ifs. Like you said, the double overtime game against Maryland, that's one they should have won. They battled with an Alabama team down in the Bahamas that I was curious going into because, look, Minnesota's dealt with their fair share of adversity as well, with attrition before the season starts, injuries during the year to Taylor Woodson, who now is missing the year. They've had a lot to kind of try and find their way as well. But so far, they only have 3 losses, and I think the only one you would punish them for, if you're going to punish them, is the loss at Kansas. But I still give credit to scheduling a true road game in your non-conference. The loss to Maryland, I think people would have expected it heading in. I think the way it happened, you sit there and you groan if you're a Gopher. You competed with a really good Alabama team. I think there's still a lot to like. I think if you compete toe-to-toe and it's a one-score game against Michigan tonight, or if you beat Michigan, you're firmly in that same conversation we're having about Ohio State, Michigan State, Nebraska, USC, Washington, to maybe have a case to be the 5th best team in the Big Ten. I think that's where Minnesota is if they can prove it. I think tonight is the perfect opportunity to prove it.
They're just such a veteran team, and I think they don't beat themselves. They're very similar to Illinois, where they don't turn the ball over, they shoot the ball well. Like they just do the fundamentals right, and that's something we have lauded about Dawn Plitzuweit and her team for the last couple of seasons. I'm just curious. It just feels like a team that isn't on our radar right now. That maybe in a month we're going to be like, "Wow, what were we doing with Minnesota there around the new year?" Like they could end up really going on a run here. We talked about they're going to get Michigan tonight. After that, they get 3 straight home games, Northwestern, then USC, then UCLA. Those are obviously tough, but you'd love to maybe grab 2 of those. And then you're sitting, let's say you lose to Michigan, you're probably sitting at about 3-2, 3-3 in the Big Ten. Then you go on your East Coast trip. Then it's a nice stretch of Wisconsin, Penn State, Purdue, Iowa, then Rutgers. So they've got an opportunity there in late January, early February to really get on a run. I just don't sleep on this Minnesota team because I think that I saw them in person. They're just well put together. We all thought about, Mara Braun's coming back. Well, this is finally what we kind of were hoping for the last couple of years is, look, Mara Braun's back and everybody around her got better while she was gone. Yep. And you add her in and this is a dangerous team. The other team I wanted to ask about, Dalton, was Nebraska. These are the 2 teams that sit at 500 right now in the Big Ten. Nebraska is 2-2. It feels like they lost a little bit of steam this week, though. They were undefeated on the season. Then they lose to USC. That one kind of took some of the wind out of their sails. Then they lose to Iowa. Those are the 2 losses so far. They have a win. They just picked up a win over Purdue. Where do we stand on the Cornhuskers? And it's similar to me with Minnesota, and I think that's why I bring them both up. Neither one of them have any meat to their non-conference bones in terms of who they beat. So they need to get big wins in the Big Ten. So I feel like for Nebraska, we were thinking before the USC game, they were undefeated. They were ranked in the top 20. Could they get that win and maybe go on a run and be a hosting school? I think that's out of the equation at this point. Now it feels like, can we move ourselves off the 8-9 line? Can we move ourselves up to a 6 or a 7 seed and give ourselves a better chance of making a run?
That's interesting. And I got a branch off question then for you, but I think with Nebraska, I think they've proven enough to me with Britt Prince and this perimeter offense in that loss to USC. I saw so many of the concerns I had about what the offense would be without Alexis Markowski this year, the ball movement, everything. I like what Nebraska is. I'm with you. I don't know that they can end up being a host school, but I do think that's interesting. And I do think there's enough meat on the bones for Nebraska moving forward. But I think the interesting thing that you just brought up, I mean, we've been so busy, Austin, in terms of the pecking order for the Big Ten standings. Who would you have in the conversation of hosting in the Big Ten? If you're willing to take Nebraska out, who's
Yeah.
in that conversation right now?
Well, UCLA leads the way.
Of course.
Michigan's certainly in that. I think Maryland's in that conversation. Iowa is now firmly in that conversation. Ohio State has some work to do, but I do think that the brand of Ohio State women's basketball carries some weight, and they could find themselves in that conversation. And then I would throw a couple of wild cards in there would be Michigan State. They only have one loss this season. Let's say they keep rolling. And then USC, because their losses are all to really good teams. So let's say USC does put together a nice run in the Big Ten, and we're looking at a 5-loss team with 5 top 15 losses. I guess Notre Dame's not that. But outside of that, I do think they have an outside shot to be a hosting school. So what is that? 7, 8
I think
teams, I
seven.
think. 7. I don't think all 7 are going to get there, but I think the Big
Sure.
10 could get up to 5 hosting schools. What they have 4 last year. So I
Yes.
think if you can get 5, that's a step in the right direction. The next thing is, can you get those 5 teams to the Sweet 16? The Big Ten missed on Ohio State getting to the Sweet 16 last season, but can they get that? That's the question, I think, for the Big Ten. But those
But
are the
I,
7 I would have.
I think if we frame it that way, Austin, it helps because we've been talking about teams 5 through 10 or whatever. It's just hair splitting. But
Hmm.
when we make it all of a sudden the stakes of who's the host schools, we dropped Washington, Illinois, Nebraska, and Minnesota out of
Yeah.
that conversation. So it's interesting
Would
that
you throw Washington in that conversation?
what's the overall record? You're 2-1 with a
I
loss to
just think that
USC.
the non-conference for some of these schools is what's going to get them.
That's what I want to pull up their non-conference
And
real quick.
Ohio State's in that conversation too. They don't really have a whole lot. They beat West Virginia. That's a solid win. Michigan State has the Ole Miss win, but not a whole lot else. Maryland, to be honest with you, doesn't have much, but they did beat Kentucky. So kind of each of these teams has that one win.
Yeah.
Iowa has the win over Baylor. Washington is what? What's their best non-con win?
Looking at it now, I think it's Utah.
Yeah, see, that's not going to get it done.
And they had that loss to Stanford. So I'm with you. I think
Yeah.
Washington would have to finish top 4 in the Big Ten to be a
Yeah.
host school.
And Minnesota and Nebraska don't have any signature wins on their resumes in the non-con, and Illinois doesn't either. I mean, they won at Florida State. That doesn't carry a lot of weight. They lost at Oregon State.
And that one's not good as it once was. The win against who did you just say the win
Florida State.
over?
Yeah, they're
Florida State,
struggling.
thank
Yeah,
you.
they're
Yeah.
they're struggling. Yeah. So I do think that there is a 7-team kind of cutoff based upon like, look, I think you're going to be good. And like,
Yeah.
it's funny because Washington could be 5th in the Big Ten come season's end, and I still don't know if they're a hosting school just because they don't have enough. Now it depends on who you beat in the Big Ten. Let's say Washington has wins over Michigan, which they do, and then let's say they get Michigan State and they get Maryland and they get Ohio State. Like all of a sudden you're just acute. They get Iowa. Like then all of a sudden you're looking, okay, well maybe they can work their way in because the Big Ten is going to be quad one city. You're going to have so many quad one opportunities in the Big Ten. So not to say they can't do it. I would say though those 7 teams I listed off: UCLA, Iowa, Maryland, Ohio State, Michigan, and USC would be the teams that I see having a shot at it.
Well, and I think USC has to roll if they
Yes.
want to get there. Ohio State does have the non-conference win over number 21 West Virginia in pocket that they can boast. Michigan State's win over number 15 Ole Miss was a really strong one. And by the way, Ohio State's win against West Virginia was a 2-point win. Michigan State's was by 17
Yeah.
against the number 15 team in the country. I mean, it was a dominating effort. Michigan State didn't drop a game in the non-conference. Neither did Yeah, Ohio State didn't either, right? Oh,
Yeah, they
UConn.
did.
They
They
lost
lost
to
to
UConn.
UConn. Yep.
But ultimately, that's a good thing to keep in mind. I think when you
Mhm.
start talking resumes, I think we do have a class of 7. I think we agree on that. But
And
that's an interesting discussion.
Michigan's an interesting one because they don't really have a win necessarily. Like they smoked Notre Dame, but their loss to UConn being so tight is what I think is carrying a lot of weight for
100%.
Michigan.
And I think
Um,
deserved.
Something to keep in mind as we have this discussion. I don't think Washington's in this discussion, and here's another reason why. Charlie Cream has him in his last 4 buys. So he has
Mm,
Washington on the bubble right now.
that's
Now
insane.
that was before the Michigan win. So that has certainly changed. I would imagine they're nowhere near the bubble after that win. But Indiana is the last team in the field. Those are the only 2 bubble teams in the Big 10 as of December 30th. Indiana has lost a couple of times since then, so we'll be curious to see. I think tomorrow he'll put out a new one where some of these Big 10 teams stack up. But it's an interesting conversation and one that we could probably have for 3 hours if we kept it going. But we should probably let the people go. Dalton, this has been wonderful. You're heading out west. Safe travels. Enjoy Seattle and Eugene. They're fun towns and cities, and hopefully you get to see some good basketball out there. I think you will, and hopefully for all of us, we get to watch some good basketball.
No, absolutely excited for it. Off the air, you're going to need to give me some travel recommendations for Seattle and Eugene. Looking forward to that. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Enjoy,
If you're a
everybody.
mac and cheese guy, the best mac and cheese in the world is in Seattle. So
Okay.
that's where I went multiple times in my stay, and it did not disappoint. It's right next to the original Starbucks, right by the
Oh,
market. So
okay.
they make the cheese like right there in the window. You can watch them making it with like the machines and stuff. It's really cool.
I'll pack a lawn
Uh,
chair too.
so there you
Sit there
go.
and look through the window.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's it for us here on episode 84. Thank you to all who have joined us live or to watch us after the fact. Subscribe to the Back Home Network. Steve, we appreciate you and your support. Tell people about our show. We certainly appreciate it. For Dalton Shetler, I'm Austin Render. This has been episode 84 of the Dribble Drive.